It's the rare midweek episode in the spring of Frogs Insider, but today we break down TCU and Notre Dame's Sweet 16 matchup, and I sit down with Chauncey Franks to talk a little bit about TCU FCA. Let's get into it right now. Hey, Frog fans, welcome into another episode of Frogs Insider presented by the Flying T Club. I'm Jamie Plunkett. Melissa Treebwasser will be along shortly. If you are with us in the fall for Frogs Insider, you know that we get into a rhythm of doing a Sunday night episode and then a midweek episode to preview the upcoming football game. Well, we're bringing back that weekly format this week to talk a little bit about TCU's upcoming Sweet 16 matchup with Notre Dame. Melissa sits down with Jessica Smetana and Mike Golic Jr., two notable Notre Dame alums in the sports industry nationwide. Very excited for you to hear both of those interviews. They are incredible. Jessica and Mike are absolute rock stars for coming on the show, and we couldn't be more grateful for their time. And Melissa, as always, does a tremendous job with those previews. Later on in the show as well, I sit down with Chauncey Franks. He's the leader of Fellowship of Christian Athletes on TCU's campus. He's been at TCU for 15 years. We hear a little bit more about his journey, the work that FCA is doing on campus, and their annual banquet is coming up. More details on that from Chauncey in a little bit. But first, before we get into any of that, have to talk about our wonderful presenting sponsor, the Flying T Club. The Flying T Club is TCU's NIL collective. They are the only NIL collective for the Horned Frogs, and they support over 130 TCU student athletes, partnering them with local organizations in and around the city of Fort Worth to make a bigger impact in our community. It's so cool to see the work that Flying T Club does with these student athletes and, of course, supports them through their collective as well. If you want to know more about how you can support the Flying T Club, all you have to do is go to flyingtclub.com and you can see how you can contribute to the work that the Flying T Club is doing with TCU student athletes. We're also a part of Dave Campbell's Texas Football's Republic of Football Network over here at Frogs Insider. That is a podcast feed that has a show for every D1 football program in the state of Texas. You can find that feed wherever you get your podcasts just by searching Republic of Football Network, and that feed will pop up. Leave it a review. Make sure that you subscribe to it. Share it with a friend. We love being a part of this network. It is so much fun during football season to get together with a lot of folks in the network and talk a little trash to each other when those in-state rivalry games are coming on up. And I know that we'll be looking forward to doing that again next fall. So, Republic of Football Network, wherever you get your podcasts, to find that feed, flyingtclub.com to learn more about the Flying T Club. And if you just want the Frogs Insider content, which I know you love, find Frogs Insider wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe, leave a rating and review, and then hit the YouTube channel as well. We've got a ton of content over there right now. All of these interviews are going to be up on the YouTube channel. This show in its full will be up on the YouTube channel, but also things like media availabilities with Haley Van Lith and Mark Campbell. Those interviews from earlier this week are up. Interviews from the first day of spring football practice, those are up on the on the YouTube channel as well. So anything that you want related to TCU athletics, it's probably over there on the YouTube channel or right here in this podcast stream. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you share it with a Horned Frog friend so that everybody from TCU is up to date on all the goings on in TCU's athletics department. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. The first interview that we're going to do is Melissa sitting down with Mike Golic Jr. talking about Notre Dame, and let's just get into that conversation right now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another preview edition, specifically of the Frogs Insider podcast, as we get an opportunity to break down TCU, Notre Dame, and the Sweet 16 for women's basketball. And as I've told people multiple times, my favorite part about having a good team around TCU is I get to talk to all of the people I admire in the industry and that I think are just awesome people. And so we get to do that again today with probably, I don't want to, float your ego here too much, Mike, but probably my favorite all-time guest that I've ever had. And I get to have him for a second time because this man not only knows college football, calls college football, but he is a Notre Dame alum, a Notre Dame athletics alum, and a big women's basketball fan. So I am very happy to be joined by Mike Golic Jr. of the Gojo and Golic show over on DraftKings Network. We also have another commonality here because you have our good friend, Marshall Newhouse, on to talk football with you all of the time as well. So you're basically a part of the Frog fam at this part, Mike, at this point.
I will say, and Mark Cullen, the SID for TCU, has always been a great friend and someone I enjoy visiting when I've had a chance to to work with TCU and get to call those games. So yeah, I've got a lot of Horned Frog connections everywhere. I've enjoyed my trips down there. So great to talk to you again. It's been way too long, and honored to be considered a favorite guest of the show. I will take that responsibility very seriously, and I also know this is a method of you trying to butter me up before we get ready to talk about our teams playing each other. So don't think I'm also not hip to that too.
Listen, if I'm anything, it's transparent, right? So, and I will say you have a high standard to live up to, because the people don't know this yet, but I talked to Jessica Smetana yesterday, she's moving up the ranks. She is moving up the ranks. So you've got some big shoes to fill, but having talked to you before, I'm very confident you could do that. Mike, let's jump right into it. Notre Dame women's basketball, especially Notre Dame in general, is no stranger to playing in these types of games. This is a team that has won a national championship recently, that has played in Sweet 16s, and it has a Naismith finalist for Player of the Year candidate, Hannah Hidalgo. TCU as a program has literally never played in a Sweet 16. And I can say that to be true for both the men and the women, which is kind of a shocking fact. So uncharted territory, though these individual players have played in a lot of NCAA tournaments, and Haley Van Lith will be playing in her 5th Sweet 16. What do you think, as someone who has played in games of this magnitude, the difference is doing it for the first time as a unit versus being a team that's kind of been there, done that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I always go back to is someone that, when I was in college, we didn't have the college football playoff, but I played in the BCS title game against an Alabama team that was going for back-to-back championships. And I think with the experience on a stage like that, it's how normal you can make the moment. So much of athletics is coaches, players is trying to use routine to defeat the uncertain. And when you go into a situation and you can make it feel more normal, not just in the routine, but in your approach when you get to critical situations. So you don't get that quicksand feeling the first time you get down 6, 8, 10 points in a game if it's basketball. If all of a sudden you have a turnover in the first in a football game in the first quarter, if your response can be more muted because of that experience, which helps everything we do in life, I think that's where this becomes invaluable. If you're a team that gets out to a hot start, that's easy. You ride the wave, you do the things that you've always done. But it's the first time you encounter adversity, and you're always going to have it in a game of this magnitude, what the response is. And I've always, that's the benefit of experience in anything in life, but especially in these situations, that quicksand that can come if you're a team that's not used to weathering the early storm in this situation, and you're thinking, oh my God, it's our first Sweet 16. I've never been here before. I might never get back if I'm a senior, and the gravity of it can eat you alive if you're not careful.
I think that's such a good point, and why we've seen kind of Haley Van Lith, when these two teams played the first time, she scored 19 over 21 points in the second half when TCU was down big. But why she's been able to be so steady when things get a little bit tight, because she has been here so many times. And, like she said in her media availability on Wednesday, like she has generally been the favorite in those games. She's been on the team that's expected to win, and this is the first time she's kind of going in as an underdog. But we've seen them kind of battle that underdog mentality really all season. They did it against NC State, they did it against Notre Dame, but then you saw them come up against a team like South Carolina, get blitzed early and never recover. And I think there's also some parallels to what TCU football faced when they played Georgia in the national championship game. Sonny Dykes had never played in a game of that level. Mark Campbell is in his 4th year as a head coach, and this is really his first kind of NCAA tournament experience as the one in charge. How much does coaching additionally play in that, and being able to set that tone for the players?
It's huge. You brought that up, how you structure the plan for an environment like this. And you look on the other side at Neil Ivey, who we got a chance to talk to before the tournament started on our show. She's been through this as a player, where she won a national championship with Notre Dame in 2001. She's been through this as an assistant coach in 2018 with Muffet McGraw. And now she's got enough experience of her own, kind of, the parallels with her and Marcus Freeman on campus, two people that had a ton of success both in their personal athletic career and as assistants, now getting to mold a program in their own likeness. And for Niele now, she's been on the job enough to know not just, what she thinks she wants to do, but what she's seen work already and work on these stages getting into March Madness. And so I think it's huge to be able to source from so many different buckets of experience if you are Niele Ivey on the Notre Dame side, and to have a veteran roster. Hannah Hidalgo, you mentioned, is the Naismith Player of the Year, But you look at, the veterans like Olivia Miles, Sonia Citron, Maddie Westbeld, that all can point to their own personal experience in big games on what is a pretty veteran roster. Liatu King coming as the transfer this season, but someone that's played and excelled at a really high level before that. I think having that experience every which way on the roster, but certainly that tone set by coaching matters a ton.
You mentioned there's a lot of players I want to talk about individually, but you mentioned Maddie Westbeld. She missed that first game, and Sedona Prince was kind of able to go off, with her height advantage against a true freshman, and I just completely lost her name, Kate Koval. And Kate Koval no longer gets to play like a freshman anymore, right? So her experience is significantly different. But Maddie Westbeld is going to present a big challenge for the Frogs. How do you see kind of that post matchup going on Saturday, and can Sedona Prince still control the game like she did the first time around?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to get Notre Dame, that's where it's going to be. But Maddie helps a lot with floor spacing and what she's able to do as an offensive threat with her size and height as the Notre Dame team that's not the biggest and tallest in the world. You're not going to confuse them with USC or South Carolina or some of these squads where the length and the athleticism is the sell. But Maddie's ability to, get you uncomfortable on the offensive end of the floor with the way that she can stretch that and her presence inside, I think are huge. And again, just another steadying force in a player that's used to those big moments. So I think with this whole Notre Dame team, you can talk about so many players that have come on and excelled in their roles on this team and the impact that they play. But I truly think now that Sonia Citron's kind of started to get her due nationally, I think Maddie Westbeld occupies that true unsung hero role on this current Notre Dame team.
Yeah, you mentioned Sonia Citron, and that's somebody who I've thought could really be the secret weapon, because when you look at these two backcourts, I mean, you've got Donovan Hunter, Haley Van Lith, and Madison Connor going up against Sonia Citron and Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo. I mean, the star power and the ability on these two rosters is unbelievable. And as good as TCU's backcourt has been, Notre Dame's is probably the best in the country right now. What kind of problems do they present for opponents, both offensively and then defensively, where I do think the Irish are a little bit underrated?
Yeah, I mean, defensively, Hannah Hidalgo is the tip of the spear, right? She's just uncommon energy for someone who's also as an important part of their offensive game as she is. She's top 5 in points per game in women's college hoops, but to also then be able to expend all that energy offensively and then still mash turbo on the defensive side, where she's picking people up the full length of the court. She's in your hip pocket everywhere you go. She's got that offensive line ability to stay in front of her offensive player on every possession. And so you start with, I think her energy is always what jumps off the page. And then that gives way to the rest of the team that's able to kind of set the tempo off of her. And so I think you start the defensive energy with her. Olivia Miles, her vision, her ability as a passer. I mean, she's getting lauded by Chelsea Gray and the Women of the W for being such an elite distributor of the basketball. The way her and Hannah kind of had that quarterback receiver relationship at times, full length of the court passes. And then to have all of that complemented by Sonia, who just seems to be such a steadying force in big moments for them, because maybe she doesn't do either of those things defensively or distributing the ball as well as two of the other backcourt mates for Notre Dame. But Sonia's such a complete package in terms of, I think, the physical attributes, her ability to take players off the dribble, her ability as a shooter, but then how gritty she can be on the glass, getting second chance points and working there. All of that combined in a package, she's as complete a player as I've watched this year in women's college hoops. And it's no surprise now I've seen her get talked about a lot more as one of the top picks in the WNBA draft upcoming, because she is a player that can do so much for you in a game at the next level that demands that.
Well, and assuming that Haley matches up with Hannah Hidalgo and that Donovan Hunter has Olivia Miles, that you could be seeing Madison Connor trying to chase Sonia Citron. And as much as we love Madison Connor, her defense has been called "she tries" a lot by the coaching staff and her teammates this year. And so she really could be the key, because Haley, I think, is very similar to Hannah Hidalgo. Maybe not as quick and as fast with her hands, but it's that bulldog mentality of she is going to make life really difficult, even if she's not going to be looked at as a defensive stopper. Donovan Hunter, on the other hand, might be the most elite, complete defensive player that no one talks about in the tournament.
I do think the styles matchup with Haley and Hannah in the same space is interesting, because both those really fiery players, like Notre Dame is no stranger to seeing Haley in big time games. And she's a player that's really good at getting under your skin. She's not afraid to go out there and mix it up. And with Hannah, that's one of the things that Coach Ivy talked about with Hannah in year 2 is her ability to sort of calm herself in certain situations. She is such an emotional, fiery, energetic player. It's the old Mike Tomlinism. I'd rather say whoa than sick 'em. I'd rather have to pull you back. But Hannah Hidalgo being able to demonstrate restraint in certain situations is going to be challenged by Haley, who's a great player at getting you off your game in more than just what she can afford you on the basketball court skill-wise.
And I think that that's really what happened, in November. This game is going to be played 4 months to the day of that one, but that they were able to kind of get Hannah flustered, and it made her more inefficient. And that's when TCU was able to kind of get back into this game. You get people in foul trouble, you get them out of a rhythm, you get them out of a game, and when you're such a volume scorer like Hannah Hidalgo is, if that rhythm gets disrupted, it can really change the entire focus of the offense. So the last kind of player when we look at the starting five is going to be Liatu King, who you mentioned, and that's probably going to be Agnes Eminopu matching up against her. And that to me is Agnes probably is better defending a player that finds himself more inside, but King has presented so many matchup problems. Mentioned she's kind of their one main transfer, but what makes her so good, and how has she been able to fit so seamlessly into this high-powered team on both ends of the floor?
Yeah, despite not being the tallest player on the court, a wingspan that's going to rival anyone, and it's almost like that Dennis Rodman-esque ability to just go get the ball wherever it's at. She just vacuums the basketball on rebounds. She's so good at weaving her way into the paint, getting tough boards for this team, and then is a capable mid-range shot maker on the other end, can be one of the people that's a beneficiary from the great passing from that backcourt. And she's someone that, again, I have so much respect for, because you go from being a star prior to now coming in and starring in your role in this lineup for Notre Dame. And she has so seamlessly done the dirty yeoman's work of cleaning up on the defensive glass and getting the transition started for a Notre Dame team that can be so good when they're running the open court with the basketball. I've just been so impressed. You'll see these scrums. She's never the tallest one out there, but then all of a sudden her hand just emerges out of the top of the pile like she's high pointing a ball in the end zone. And then she immediately brings that back down with all the strength that she possesses and gets the next thing going. So she really has been a great complementary force in this lineup to help supplement what Maddie and the other bigs have been able to do for Notre Dame.
I think that's such a fun. I was talking yesterday with Jessica about this. Is I think that the real basketball people, the technicians, the matchup to watch outside of Hannah and Haley is going to be King and Eminopu, because Agnes is the same way. I mean, she's probably got like a 6'3" wingspan, and she's maybe 5'10". She's a kid that won a national championship at Stanford as a freshman, and her role has changed considerably over the last few years, as she's kind of tried to find her fit at TCU. But it's same thing, just strong and gritty and dirty. Now the thing will be interesting is Agnes is going to shoot a lot of 3-pointers and try to pull King out to the perimeter, and I think that's where TCU might have kind of their significant advantage offensively. But the defensive battle and the rebounding battle between those two should be really, really, really entertaining for true basketball fans.
Yeah, no, it's a real Hoopers matchup across the board. And I think, for TCU, listen, this is a Notre Dame team that has come into the tournament clearly ticked off at how they finished the season. And the renewed defensive effort that you've seen is now going to get by far the best challenge they've seen since they come back. It's great putting up 100 in the first round. It's great the kind of defensive performance they had against Michigan in the second round, but now this is going to be a real opportunity for Notre Dame on their side to say, all right, we have truly gotten back to the team that a month and a half ago was number one in the country. And on TCU's side, to go and try and exploit some of the things that Notre Dame got frustrated with down the stretch and ultimately ended up dropping a bunch of games because of.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How much of that is just a veteran team kind of playing with their food a little bit in the late stretch of the season, getting kind of worn down? And do you think that they've kind of completely flipped that switch, and that there's no taking their foot off at the gas at this point?
Yeah, I think this is a team that understands where their feet are right now. And, I don't want to disrespect some of the teams they played down the stretch, because you look at Duke, NC State, these are really good teams that, have a chance to currently, or, came into this tournament with what a lot of people thought were a chances to maybe cut down netting and hang banners. But I think it's also one of those things. It's a long season. Notre Dame going into that, I think, had won 19 in a row in the lead up to being ranked number one. And this is a long season, and to maintain that standard of excellence for that long a time, maybe eventually you just run out of gas a little bit. And so I think for Notre Dame, that week and a half that they had in between losing in the semis of the conference tournament to Duke, and then the first round of the NCAA tournament, they got a chance to get away for a little bit, have a little bit of a break, had that mental reset before the tournament. We have that rest versus rust debate all the time in sports. But I think for them, a chance to mentally turn it off for a little bit, come back reinvigorated, and then to really be able to say, all right, we know what we can do offensively when we're humming. We can be one of the best three-point shooting teams. We've got this great backcourt. We've got to plant our flag defensively again. And once they were able to overcome that almost scary moment where Olivia looked like she turned her ankle or hurt her knee again in that first game, it's really been a team that seems sure of their identity and healthy and energized at the right time of the season.
I know with Notre Dame football, you didn't have a lot of opportunities to have single season rematches, right? So you guys didn't play in a conference championship game or anything like that. But in your experience, how much does getting to play a team twice that's not like a conference opponent, do you think they're going to play with a bit of an extra chip on their shoulder, or was that so long ago that it's like a completely different season at this point?
Yeah, I think with any matchup, when you're going to see someone again, or you see someone over the course of multiple years, the stuff you take away is really hyper specific. Like, I'm sure there are certain tendencies among the players that they're going to see again that you can say, all right, what is this woman in particular like to do? What can I count on her in this area of the court? But overall, I'm sure a lot of the team trends for both have changed as teams grow and develop. We always said going into every season, hey, we're not as concerned. We want to be playing our best football in November, not September. So we're going to hopefully be a very different team at that point in the season. Once we learn about the strengths and weaknesses of new players that we're relying on, once we work through the injuries that end up affecting our teams and we figure out what our best stuff is, I'm sure for both of these teams, when you cut on the tape, there's going to be markedly different team-wide trends that you're going to have to account for and focus more on the recent film that you've seen rather than what you can maybe take away from those individual isolated matchups that might be germane from that November matchup.
And then before we kind of get into the winning and the losing and who's going to be, we talked about this before we started recording, but Haley Van Lith had a pretty viral moment at the beginning of this week after the Louisville game. I was talking to her about some of the emotions that she's expressed on the podium and just the opportunity that she's had to kind of share some of those off the court experiences. And she mentioned just her mental health struggles and growing up in the spotlight and being exposed on social media, both positively and negatively, and the toll that takes. I know, as a person who played at a very in the spotlight university, kind of right as social media was really starting to take off. You talk about just the pressure of being a student athlete, and even today being somebody who's in the spotlight and is so exposed so constantly, how difficult that can be for a young person, and even as you get into your adult years.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very real side of this where the exposure can lead to some things that make it difficult to go about your day-to-day life. I never had this, but I had friends who, just because of mistakes they had made on the football field, not anything they did off the field, not anything they did away from their field of play, but received death threats, had to involve campus security and these things. So there's the exposure that comes with that's on social media, on message boards, that can be very real. But to your point, Twitter, social media at large really started to become a thing my senior year. And even then it felt more hyper local than it did something that's expansive as it is now. Quite honestly, my job now, where I'm a 35-year-old adult man who is on social media for these things. And there's times I have to set this down and go away because that much consistent exposure to, even if it's in a sea of positive compliments, we know we're always wired to see the negative things. And seeing it in as much volume as you get on social media, and for young people who grew up with this as their way of life. I always say I'm the last of the daywalkers. I grew up playing outside. We didn't have all this stuff. And then in college, we got handed the keys long enough to be able to speak the language now. But these players, these young athletes have grown up with this as a part of their lives since they knew how to form thoughts. And so to have that consistent level of exposure to the toxins on social media, it's corrosive. There's no doubt. And I think more and more of a focus on giving players, giving athletes, giving young people in general the tools on how to better manage this. I've got ways that I use now that thankfully I've learned going through this as an adult that I look back and hope. And when I talk with other people, the hope is that the same way we hope that colleges are spending time on teaching financial literacy and life skills and these things that we always harp on, I hope that they're also spending time with their athletes, not just telling them, hey, make sure you post this, make sure you don't get in trouble. What you say is a reflection of our program. What you say and what you tweet is a miniature press conference every time you hit send. But also, hey, here are the things that you can do in this space to protect yourself. Here are the ways that you can manage this thing that can be very lucrative for you. That's a great way to build your brand. All this stuff that in the NIL era now has a dollar amount value attached to it. But here are some things to make sure that this also doesn't become a net negative and reverse polarity and start to affect the way you play, the way that Haley described. And it's not to say it's all social media. There are just inherent pressures with being an athlete on this stage that if you removed social media and technology altogether would still be incredibly trying, knowing you've got these big fan bases, these big universities, your teammates and coaches all relying on you in pivotal moments, but then to compound that by letting a whole bunch of other opinions in that get easy access to you in a way athletes 20, 30 years ago didn't have to deal with. I hope it's something that, thanks to the testimony of people like Haley, other athletes like Kevin Love that have come before and said this, that we do a better job of trying to prepare these athletes for that the same way we prepare them for the game, the same way we prepare them for media availability.
I mean, I think that's such a good point too, that you're right, that as much pressure as there is because of social media, as much as the comments get to you. I mean, we also saw a kid like Coleman Maxwell, who, got a very well publicized NIL deal to come to Kansas State, only to see his team be disappointed, and for him to break down in the locker room very transparently and very raw because of the pressure that he felt from signing that big deal. I mean, we certainly we don't know how to talk to athletes about that because it's still so new, but it's just another layer of pressure, and a good reminder that for the most part, these are still really, really young people with the weight of the world on their shoulders.
It is. And this is, again, I'm not going to sit here like I'm my dad with 30 years of experience and in my 60s with all this life experience. But as a 35-year-old, that's a little bit more close in having been a collegiate athlete. It's such a different world for exactly the reasons you mentioned. It more mimics the pro model now, where the pressure of a first round pick who's still a 23, 24-year-old, sometimes in basketball, an 18, 19-year-old coming into this situation with the financial burden, the burden of now being the primary breadwinner in a lot of cases in your household, in taking care of people, and in having to go and have the hopes and dreams of a franchise, a city, a university, all on your back. It makes it amazing, and I stop and appreciate more often when young people do this well, because it's not something anyone should know how to do well. And the fact that so many of them make it look easy is remarkable. But for the ones where it isn't as easy, having those resources and having people to talk to, that's why, when you've got former athletes on staff, when you've got people the program has that they can tap into who have maybe gone through this at the next level, I think all of those are things that you're going to need more and more now to help, because that pressure is going to get very real and it's only going to get ramped up.
Yeah, I think it's been a really eye-opening experience for me covering Haley this year, because everyone knew who Haley Van Lith was, but the thing that's been really cool, as someone who sat in, dozens of press conferences and locker room availabilities and watched her practices, like, for her to find out who she is off the court, and for her to have the boldness and the transparency that she does, with the brightest of spotlights on her, it's been really, really fascinating to see the maturity and the growth that she's shown over the course of this year. And she has just brought so much positivity in that. Okay, let's talk about the specifics of the game here. If Notre Dame wins this game, what went right for the Irish?
The defensive effort stayed where it's been for the last two games. I think you see a team that, can force turnovers early in the action for another team on offense with Hannah and how adept she is, top 5 in steals per game in the NCAA, I believe, this year, in addition to the points per game. And so I think that defensive intensity leading to early offense and early 3-point looks for Notre Dame. This is, on their best day, one of the best 3-point shooting teams in college basketball. And if they get that going early and often, you mentioned they can overwhelm you with volume. They can be a tidal wave, but that's got to start again with that renewed defensive effort that we've seen so far this postseason.
If TCU pulls off what is oddly an upset, despite being the higher seed, would still be an upset. What either went right for TCU or what went wrong for Notre Dame?
Yeah, I think Haley, as we mentioned, was able to upset the apple cart again and go out and both be an agitator and also someone that excels in the critical moments that she's used to, the way we talked about it. Having a star player who has been there and done that, and you can look to as a role player or someone else on that team who may be in a situation you're unfamiliar with, is invaluable. It calms the rest of the huddle down so much. And so if she goes out and can lead in those critical moments, and you're able to get Notre Dame off their game, you're able to get Hannah turning the ball over a little bit, some of those 3-point shots clank out early, and all of a sudden Notre Dame's forced to think about those games they came up short at the end of the season, bring up some of those bad memories that aren't all that far away. I think that's how TCU can take advantage of this and flip the script on Notre Dame.
I'm going to make sure I pass that scouting report on to Mark Campbell and the Horned Frogs for you. It's good. Hey, I can't let you go without asking you a little bit of college football. TCU brings back Josh Hoover. They have high expectations after a couple of what could be considered down years. They open at North Carolina in Bill Belichick's first game. I know it's early. I know we just started spring ball, but what will you be keeping an eye on TCU and especially that opener against Bill Belichick?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is no disrespect to TCU, but the fascination is just going to be, what do you expect? And for Sonny Dykes and company, I think that's the challenge is you're getting a completely new staff already. So anything you might have seen in the past, you can throw out. They're a team that's losing so many great players like Amarian Hampton in that backfield. Willie Lampkin, who was one of my favorite offensive linemen, despite being a 5'10" sawed-off shotgun. And so in addition to the personnel changes that you're going through, it's a total systemic change in how they do business. How much of this is going to be the Patriot stuff on either side of the ball? How much of this is going to be some meld of that and what the coordinators bring to the table? I think week one is a fascinating challenge. And while North Carolina overall, we've seen the talent certainly dip there, especially at the quarterback position last year, where it took a major nosedive off the run they had been on with Sam Howell and Drake May. I think it's just going to be fascinating. And this is another game where you talked about it's fun having the eyes of the world on your program. TCU is going to be at the center of the focus for so many people because they're next to one of the most interesting stories in sports, while they're also trying to get back towards more of the winning that we saw in 2022.
Well, you say it's going to be fun, but it's less fun in football because I don't know if you remember who Deion Sanders' first game was against and how that went for TCU and Sonny Dykes. So this is twice the Horned Frogs have been on the other side of an absolute supernova in college football.
Yeah, you know what? It'll be interesting is because I know that's been the comp for a lot of people is Deion Sanders and the life that he was able to inject in that program. A little bit different personality types. Yeah, now, we've seen Bill energized by other areas in his life that maybe make him a different guy than he was in New England when we last left him in coaching.
The beach yoga. I did not need to see that, Mike. I did not need to see the beach yoga.
And that's also going to show up. Those are going to be the signs that Bill Belichick sees in the crowd all year
I
long,
hope so.
right? When
I hope TCU fans bring it.
Oh, they have to. So Bill Belichick yoga signs, I have to imagine, are going to be a staple of college game day for the majority of the season, and very certainly a staple in opposing fan base student sections for the year. So I hope TCU begins the season, and obviously not make it inappropriate, like don't make it weird, don't go too far there. But Bill Belichick doing beach yoga absolutely seems like it is fair game for the rest of us to have a good time with starting this fall. So Horned Frogs, ball's in your court.
All right. We'll take the challenge. Mike, I really appreciate your time. Tell folks where they can find your exceptional work across the entirety of the sports landscape.
Yeah, easiest place is at Mike Golic Jr. on X, on Blue Sky. I think it's got the .blue sky thing on the back end of it there. And also on Instagram as well. Plenty of fun announcements on what's coming up for football season, what'll be going on for the rest of the summer, all of which is easiest to find there.
And be sure to be listening to Go Joe and Golic, like, download, subscribe, all of those important things wherever you get your podcast. I hope that TCU is good enough that we get to see you in Fort Worth this fall. That's the line of demarcation, right? If it's a good enough program that we get the 18 broadcasters, and I feel like we've done our job.
There we go. You know what? From your lips to God's ears, I really enjoyed. I had a couple of trips to Fort Worth during that 2022 season, so would love the chance to come back down there again and kick it with you guys. So let's all hope it happens.
We've got a lot more barbecue places you need to try too. So thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate your time as always.
Thanks for having me.
A big thanks to Mike for taking time out of his busy week to talk a little Horned Frogs and Golden Domers hoops. Super excited for this matchup. We got another conversation, though. You might have already seen it on the YouTube channel because Melissa posted it a day early just to get it out there to, space out the YouTube videos a little bit. But this is Jessica Smetana, another national college athletics analyst who hops on the show. Very thankful for her coming on the show as well. Here's Melissa's conversation with Jessica right now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Frogs Insider Podcast, brought to you by the Flying T Club and the fine folks at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. I am super excited to be here for two reasons. Number one, I get to talk to one of my favorite sports journalists and personalities, Jessica Smetana, and also because we're here to talk about the Sweet 16. And I can say in full honesty, no TCU beat reporter, journalist, anyone that covers the team has ever talked about a Sweet 16 involving TCU on the men's or women's side. So this is a doubly exciting moment for me as we get ready to prepare for TCU and Notre Dame part 2, exactly 4 months to the day of part 1, but this one with a little bit few more stakes attached to it. Jessica, I really appreciate you taking some time and being willing to talk Irish Horned Frogs part 2 with me.
So this is the first TCU Sweet 16 in men's or women's basketball?
It has never happened.
I didn't know
history.
that. I thought there may have been one at some point somewhere. I didn't know it was the first one ever.
Listen, Jessica, if I want to get a ton of clicks here, I will pivot to talking about the men and the fact that they've never made a Sweet 16 and the fact that Jamie Dixon is in year 10 and TCU did not make the tournament. But that's not what we're here for. We're not going to dwell on the negatives and the lack of positivity or whatever the boys are doing over there. We are here to celebrate women's sports and women's athletics and the women's tournament, which once again has proven that it is not just a singular person that drives this bus, but that there's great basketball happening literally all across the country.
Yeah, I actually think this TCU Notre Dame matchup might be the best with Sweet 16 game this weekend. And I'm coming with a heavy bias as a Notre Dame grad. But the fact that, I mean, there's a lot of rematches this weekend, like LSU and NC State and North Carolina and Duke. But the fact that these two teams played in November and have sort of similar, like, storylines and stakes attached to them, like both have like sort of prolific guards and both have bigs. One is like at the end of her long career, one is just beginning as a freshman and like getting a redemption arc chance. Like it is a really interesting matchup to me.
Yeah, and I guess we could start with the guard play because that is kind of where the superstars come from. Obviously, Notre Dame has, I would say, almost inarguably the best backcourt in college basketball and one of the probably all-time greats when you look at, obviously, Hannah Hidalgo, who's a finalist for the Naismith Player of the Year award. Kind of beat out Haley Van Lith for that Final Four spot, I would imagine. And then you also have Sonia Citron, who has just been an absolute revelation and doesn't get nearly the attention as her two counterparts do. And then Olivia Miles, who had a little bit of a scare last week with the ankle injury, but did not seem to be too bothered by it as Notre Dame won to advance to the Sweet 16. What is it about that group of players that not just makes them so successful, but it allows them to be able to play together?
Yeah, it's like you said, I think it's probably the best backcourt in the country when it's working well. And the last two games, the first and second round of the NCAA tournament, that backcourt was really on fire, even with Olivia Miles having the ankle scare and then having, she woke up the morning of the second round game and said that she was only at like 50% and wasn't sure if she was going to play. She had a great game on Sunday too against Michigan. The thing about all three of them is that they're all so different. Like Hannah is the player who's going to she's going to handle the ball. She's going to steal a lot on defense. Like she'll get in there and like poke the ball out of your hands. She's averaging like 4 steals a game. She can shoot the three. She can shoot the mid range. She can drive into the paint. Like she can do a lot of stuff. Olivia is the one that's going to be handling the ball a lot too, but she's going to be like making the most absurd passes you've ever seen in your life. And I actually like really have a newfound appreciation for her now that I got to see her play in person this season because my boyfriend and I live in Miami and they were in Miami to play against the Hurricanes, and watching her do these weird like no look passes and like behind the head passes and things like that, you just don't really get to appreciate it as much when you're watching it on TV. And so we're watching her and we're like, that was like the craziest thing we've ever seen. She'll like do these weird passes where she'll like put backspin on the ball and like do a bounce pass with backspin. She's probably going to be a WNBA lottery pick this year. I think she's probably going to enter the WNBA draft, although she hasn't officially announced it yet. And then, like you said, Sonia Citron, sort of the underrated player of the three, although she's been so good, especially the last stretch of the season. she's a player that like Notre Dame fans are just going to be so sad when she's gone. She's so solid. She can shoot the three ball really well. And I think the offense really works best when she's getting a lot of touches. And if she's shooting really well early and heating up, that's a player that, she's great on defense, like probably the best man defender on the team, but she can really do a lot of damage offensively too. And I think in an underrated way.
And she's got a lot of size too at 6'1", which is a tough matchup for the Horned Frogs because their guards aren't exactly giants in the backcourt. Haley plays like she's 6'3", but in reality is very generously listed at 5'9". So I think that how they defend Madison Connor, Haley Van Lith, and Donovan Hunter is going to be really interesting. You've gotten to watch a lot of Notre Dame basketball. I'm going to guess most TCU fans probably haven't seen much since the Cayman Islands, and we couldn't watch it because it was on some
yeah, right.
like making like Bally Sports and Flow Sports look accessible, whatever channel this thing was on. But what can we expect to see a little bit from the Notre Dame defense? We've seen a lot of teams come at TCU, especially down the stretch with trapping and trying to trap the high pick and roll to take away the connection that Haley and Sedona Prince have. Do you think they're going to play a little bit more straight up, or do you think we'll see some kind of junk defense and some different things?
I'm not exactly sure what to expect because this team's a little bit different than the first time these two teams played against each other. There are two players that are back for Notre Dame that were out with injuries the first matchup, which I think made freshman Kate Koval's life a lot harder. She was the one sort of primarily going, toe-to-toe with Sedona Prince, like the biggest player on Notre Dame's team, but a true freshman. Like that was only like maybe her fifth game in college. I can't remember which game of the season it was, but it was early in her college career. And she's someone who's like, I think going to be a great player and was like a super highly rated prospect. I think the number one in her position last year coming into college. So I have like very, high hopes for her, but it's hard coming in as a freshman and defending against someone that's been playing for a really long time. That's also bigger than you.
6'7" and 30 years old. It's fine.
Exactly. But Maddie Westbeld is back for Notre Dame. She was out for the first half or so of the season. She is a very experienced player and a really good defender. I think she was just playing better last season than she has been coming back from this injury, but she's someone that's played in the NCAA tournament, multiple times and is like a very solid player for Notre Dame and someone that can obviously, help out with the load there. Same with Liza Carlin, who is a transfer from Marquette. That's another big that will surely get some more minutes. She didn't play in the first matchup either. So I'm curious to see how it goes. I think Sonia Citron guarded Haley Van Lith the first time around. It'll be interesting to see if they sort of switch that up and if Hannah Hidalgo is the primary defender this time around and Sonia goes on Connor and they try to sort of shut down the perimeter more. I don't really know what to expect, but I do know that defense has been a huge area of emphasis as the season has progressed. Notre Dame, obviously went from the number one ranked team in the country with 5 or so games left to a 3 seed in the tournament. And a big reason for that slump was they just weren't shooting well the last few games of the season. Granted, against great competition, all of their losses came against like top 15 teams. But the other thing was their defense just like wasn't as intense as it had been earlier in the season. So I would expect them to come out with some pretty high intensity on defense. And that will their philosophy is sort of like get the defensive work done. And that will help transition onto offense and get players open and make shots.
Yeah, I think that's something that both of these teams are really underappreciated for how well they play defense. I mean, TCU had Louisville in hell in the second quarter, like a 17-0 run when they went from being down 17-14 to having a 20-plus point lead at the half. And I think that's going to be the fascinating matchup is which team can get the offense going quickly enough, but play the defense that's going to lead to those easy transition opportunities. TCU had to come from behind big in that first matchup, but that was also a team that was really one of their first couple of games playing together. And I don't think at this point in the season, TCU can count on being able to come back from down double digits against Notre Dame the way that they played the last 2 weeks or last 2 games.
Yeah, that's the other thing that was sort of interesting about the first matchup. Like I was watching the game cast because like you said, it was pretty hard to find those Cayman Island games, but Notre Dame had I want to say like an 8-point lead going into the fourth quarter. And then they totally ran out of gas. And then they lost their next game too against Utah. And that point in the season when you only have 6 players, in your rotation because there's so many players out with injury, it's obviously, not ideal. Obviously TCU is also very talented and good. I'm not, not giving Notre Dame an excuse there, but Notre Dame did play really well throughout the first 3 quarters and then things sort of fell off. Like like it did honestly this latter half of the season for Notre Dame, kind of running out of gas towards the finish line of the regular season in the ACC tournament.
Do you think that was just kind of I mean, just being the end of the season, you've got a veteran team, they've played a lot, this kind of let off the gas. Or is that something that you're worried about, or with the long break between games at this point, does it really matter?
I think the long break between games is so huge for the major conferences in women's basketball. Having like the coaches all talk about it too, having like those 2 weeks to just like really reset, especially because the first week, especially you lose your conference tournament, you get like a full week before selection Sunday. You don't even know who you're going to play against. So it's not like you can sit in the film room all day and like prep for the next team. You're sort of just taking a little bit of a break. And I read an interview that Notre Dame beat reporter Eric Hansen did with Muffet McGraw about like what that time period means. And it is really important for the players. Like it's a long season. You're in class, like you've got like these midweek ACC games where you're traveling all across the country now. And especially the way Notre Dame's back half of their season was stacked with like ranked team after a stretch where they weren't really playing a lot of ranked teams back to back. Not a great like schedule and just a long season. And so after the break, I would say during the break, a lot of Notre Dame fans were like, "Oh, this is like doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good. This team looks broken. Like they should not have lost to Florida State. They probably should have beaten Duke." But after seeing the first 2 games in the NCAA tournament, the return to like the intense, like really aggressive style of defense, like watching Hannah Hidalgo get all her steals and watching the team just shoot better. Liatu King, who we haven't even mentioned, is also another underrated player in this tournament for Notre Dame. She was a portal pickup. She had a perfect game against Michigan. She was like 7 for 7 from the field. Just a really, I think 15 rebounds or something crazy. Like she's super underrated. She's averaging a double-double per game. So another player that's like really helpful to Notre Dame to have now. And yeah, so I think maybe fans were worried at the end of the season, like this doesn't look right. But now that the tournament has started and they look like they did in the middle part of the season, the beginning of the season, when they beat UConn and USC and Texas, I think, some of the worries have been a little bit squashed. But then again, now comes your hardest competition yet. You have to play TCU. If they do win, like you have to play Texas again. Like they beat Texas in double overtime back in November, but that's a 1 seed obviously. So it's not easy to win in the tournament, but certainly the first 2 rounds going the way they did helped.
You kind of jumped on my next question a little bit in a great way, because you're a professional. This is what you do, right? The segues are just natural. But you mentioned Liatu King. Relatable. But TCU saw kind of a similar performance from Donovan Hunter, their point guard. She's the youngest player on the team. She started as a true freshman for Oregon State a season ago and made the Elite Eight with that program before they lost their Pac-12 membership, rest in peace, and she came over to TCU. So is there like a player maybe that we haven't mentioned, or maybe you want to just talk about Liatu King again, but that you think could step up, that could be a difference maker outside of those superstar names that exist up and down that roster?
Yeah, I think that would definitely be Liatu King. She's just super solid. Like she's been a player who's just quietly, averaging 11 points per game, 10 rebounds per game, shooting 55% from the field this whole season. And this is her first NCAA tournament. As Pam Ward not so gently told Notre Dame fans during the Stephen F. Austin game, she was like, "This is Liatu King's first tournament game," because she played at Pitt. It was like, oh no. But she's just really like I said, just like quietly, just like so solid, and has been really just a great addition for Neil Ivey and for this team.
Yeah, I think that she could really be the problem defensively, because when you look at how TCU likes to play, they generally start small, and you've got probably Agnes Emanopu is going to have to match up with her early on. And Agnes has a great wingspan that's probably well over 6 feet. But is not the tallest player on the court. So I think that'll be a really thing to watch. Agnes is also an exceptional rebounder from kind of that guard forward position. So watching those two battle for those rebounds, I think could be one of the underrated points. Like if you want to get into like the weeds of basketball, that's probably the area to watch. But it's going to be really hard for people to take their eyes off of Hannah Hidalgo and Haley Van Lith, I think, because I have a feeling both of those two will be very geared up to put on a show.
They're both so competitive. Like and Haley Van Lith has a long history playing against Notre Dame. Obviously, when she was at Louisville, there's a rivalry there between Notre Dame and Louisville in the ACC. And I watched Haley Van Lith play, for Team USA and 3x3. Like, she's such a competitor. She really wants to win. And like, I'm so happy for the season that she's had this year after last year. A lot of people were so critical of her defense in the tournament, and it just felt like such a crappy way for her, like, season to end, especially because like she's a player I had been watching for a while. So it's been nice to see her become, Big 12 player of the year and like lead this team to its first Sweet 16 ever, which I just learned. But Hannah is the same way. Hannah is, I would describe her as like annoying. Like, the way that she plays defense is super annoying. One of the things that she's gotten better at, I think, is picking her spots when she's going to try to make a steal, when she's going to try to make a play on defense. I think she can get like really eager to do that sometimes. And now I think she's kind of like matured into the position more. And she's like, this is when I should do this. This is when maybe it's not worth it. But when she does, fast break, she's down the court before you can even blink. And again, it's just like, I would be so annoyed if I had to play against her.
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm going to be very annoyed by her Saturday afternoon, and I'll be in a photo spot, so I'll have an up-close and personal view of her being annoying back. You brought up Haley Van Lith and her competitiveness, and it's something that I think anybody that's followed her career has been really aware of. Anybody that's listened to her press conferences this year, that's listened to Coach Campbell talk about her. He said today in media availabilities, the every fiber of her body is committed to winning. And we saw, we talked about a couple of viral clips before we started recording. We talked about the Sedona dancing clip, and we're going to let that one leave. We're just going to leave that one off to the side. We're not going to deal with that. But then we also talked about the clip. I had an opportunity to talk to Haley in the post-game locker room. And asked her a couple questions about, we've seen her break down on the podium multiple times this year with the emotion. And so I'm just kind of asking her why has that emotion been so prevalent throughout this season, while we've seen her also play with such joy. And it kind of brought to light just the pressure that these athletes are under. I mean, you mentioned the viral moment. Anybody that follows women's basketball saw the shrug with Caitlin Clark, hitting from 50 feet or something behind her. She's been exposed through the Olympics and just being a kid that's portaled twice. You experienced some of that, obviously, too, in your role. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about the pressure of being in the spotlight like that, and you've been in the spotlight from a young age as well, and what kind of toll that can take when you know what people are saying, even if you try to block out the noise?
Yeah, I mean, it's super like disturbing to read weird stuff about you on the internet. Obviously, like, if you're an athlete, or even, someone like me who's just on a well listened to podcast, like, you try to ignore it. You don't like look for it, although I think some people do, and maybe like compulsively, just to see what people are saying. I try to like stay away from it, but you still, it finds you sometimes. I think like the thing that I remind myself of sometimes is that me being on the show that I'm on as the only full-time woman member of that show, it pisses off so many people. And I kind of think that that's funny. And whenever I'm like, oh my God, like, for lack of a better term, like, this is a sausage fest. And like, this is like, it just is like, this is too much. I just remind myself that like me being there to break up the party is really pissing someone off somewhere. And that can kind of be nice too. And in the same way for a lot of like women playing sports these days, a lot of people don't want to see women play sports. A lot of people are trying to downplay the impact that women's sports have in culture and in our conversations and in our lives, and try to say like, no one watches that. Like, that's the most common thing you hear when you talk about any women's sports, right? It's like, no one watches that. And it's like, actually, I do. My friends do. All the people that I talk to in my community do. And the fact that it really pisses you off that happens is like, it's kind of funny. Like, you should probably deal with that on your own, because it's not really my problem that upsets you so much.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend, and I was talking about Haley Van Lith, and he's like, I don't know who that is. And I was like, that's more of a you thing.
You must live under a rock.
Yeah,
like, I'm
like
sorry.
A college wrestling fan. Like,
oh God.
You want to talk about, we don't know what you're talking about. Come on, man.
If you follow any college athletics, like, I'm sorry. The women's basketball players, it's been said over and over again this year, and I think that it's so true. They're more recognizable coming into this NCAA tournament, the average person off the street can name more women's college basketball players than men's college basketball players right now. And part of the reason is that women are really good at marketing themselves and lifting up the other players in the sport. And part of it is also that obviously, there's no one and done. Like, you have to stay in college for multiple years, and all of those sorts of reasons. But part of it is also that, like, we're really good at making sure, like, we talk about the women that we watch play sports, and like, we're really good at creating these fandoms. And I think that that's super important and something that, like, I'm always happy to be a part of.
I think that's a really good point. Is it not just about the women being able to market themselves, but the kind of rising tide lifts all boats? There's still a competitiveness, obviously, and there's a competition for eyeballs, but it does seem that they're more willing to share the wealth, so to speak, than we see on the men's game. I mean, I follow the sport, and I know I can name off the top of my head Cooper Flag, and then
right,
probably Toppin at Tech, and after that, it gets really difficult to start digging for names.
This is terrible, but I could not tell you the starting five of Notre Dame's men's basketball team. Like, Marcus Burton, I know, is like the best point guard in the ACC, but like, other than that, like, they're just not as good, and it's just so hard. There's so many new players every year. The women's team has just been, especially at Notre Dame, like, the women's basketball team for my entire lifetime and the entire time I was a student has been full of stars. Skylar Diggins-Smith was a senior when I was coming into college. Neil Ivey obviously played at Notre Dame, won a national championship. Muffet McGraw is like one of the great Hall of Fame women's basketball coaches in history. And if you watch any WNBA game, it's guard after guard that went to Notre Dame. Jackie Young, Arike Gumbawale, Jewel Lloyd.
Wings.
Yes. It's just like player after player after player, K-Mac, like, there's just so many of them. So it's just a really, I think, strong program, and something that, luckily I was a part of it when I was there, and now I get to keep being a fan.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch the TCU fan community go from very early on, like, I'm not going to watch women's sports, I don't care that they're good, oh, it's not a good brand of basketball, to now the thread on the Horned Frog Blitz message board is thousands of comments long, and people, like, looking around, there were 7,500 people almost at the stadium on Sunday. It was the biggest crowd ever for a TCU women's basketball game, surpassing the previous biggest crowd, which was when number 2 Baylor and Brittany Griner came to Fort Worth several years ago, a game that they got absolutely smoked in. Because all Baylor did for 35 years was smoke us. Yeah, they beat us for 35 years. We beat them 3 times this year. It was great. But so it's been fun to kind of see the community buy in, and I took a moment to kind of just like look around the stadium and see all of these men with their daughters and entire families and women and young and old and all ages. And that was one of the things that Haley was asked about post-game, was all of these different types of people wearing her jersey and what it means to kind of transcend women's basketball and just reach sports fans in that way.
Yeah, I think that that's awesome. And I'm, again, like, super happy that she's had this season. And I think it was like Andrea Carter or one of the College Game Day hosts was like, just be as loud when you praise her as you were criticizing her. Unfortunately, that's not really the world we live in. It's way more fun for people to, like, crap on players. But
I won't even say what it was, but we posted a TikTok clip from the locker room interview with her, and like the search terms, like the search was just so inappropriate. And I'm just like, this is a woman expressing her mental health struggles and really just like speaking and it's about her appearance. And I was like, we're still there. We've got a long way to go. I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but I do want to ask about Nyla Ivey. You've talked about Muffet McGraw, and, following a legend is such a difficult thing to do. But Coach Ivey has done it with such grace and class, and has obviously been able to recruit at a high level and win at a high level. How do you see kind of, Mark Campbell's only in his 4th year of being a head coach and only in his 2nd year of being a power conference head coach. Do you think that there's an advantage there with Ivy with their experience and just what she's already been able to accomplish so far in the sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nielle's great. I'm a huge fan of hers. I think even over the 5 years she's been at Notre Dame, like, we've seen her kind of grow as a coach, and it's been really cool to see, because she is like one of the Notre Dame legends. Like, she played for Muffet, won a national championship, was an assistant for years, was an assistant in the NBA for a year, and then came back to Notre Dame to succeed Muffet as the head coach. She's not made it to the Elite 8 yet. And so this is like a sort of like recurring thing. It's like, well, when are they going to make it out of the Sweet 16 round? And to her, like, defense, right? 3 years ago, Notre Dame was like still kind of rebuilding the program after she took over, but they made it to the Sweet 16. That was a great year. They were 5 seed. 2 years ago, lost their best player like a week before the tournament. I mean, there's not a lot you can do when that happens. They still made it to the Sweet 16, but they couldn't get further. And then last year, made it to the Sweet 16, played against Oregon State, lost in just a weird game. It was the game, I don't know if you remember this, but they made Hannah Hidalgo take her nose ring out like midway through the game.
That's right.
And so she missed a ton of minutes, and there was like no explanation for it. They had to get pliers out and like yank it out of her nose, even though she had worn it the whole season. It was so bizarre. But that being said, it was still a great Oregon State team, and there's remnants of that team all over women's basketball right now.
She'll be back
on like every team.
Again. Yep.
Yeah, including USC and Oklahoma. So Neil Ivey is definitely, I think, a great coach, and I think it would be huge for her to finally get over that Sweet 16 hump. I don't think that it's like, there's totally understandable reasons why it hasn't happened yet, and it's really hard to win once you get to at this point in the tournament, even if you are a really great team. Like again, last year, like lost one of their starters in the ACC tournament also. So this is a year where like the starters are all healthy. The team has 3 excellent guards. Like it's kind of like not really, I wouldn't say it's like an expectation, like you have to make a Final Four, but I would say in like January and February, like that was sort of the expectation. It was like, this team's playing really well and they have beaten Texas, UConn, and USC. Like this should be a Final Four team. So I guess we'll see what happens this weekend, but she, I think, really, really wants this. I know the team really, really wants it. This is definitely the best tournament team they've had of her entire tenure so far. That's not a controversial thing to say at all, given all the health stuff I just listed. But it's a tough draw. TCU is really good. Texas is really good. So if you win on Saturday, like it's not going to get easier from there. But first things first, you got to play the Sweet 16 round and at least get through it one time.
if there's one area that I'm 100% confident and willing to admit that Niall Ivey has a gigantic advantage, it is on sideline fits. Because Mark Campbell, God bless him, that man loves a sweatsuit and he can rock a sweatsuit. But Coach Ivey, she really understands how to bring it when it comes to the sideline fashion.
Yeah, no, she's kicking everyone's ass with sideline
I don't want
fashion.
to hear Kim Mulkey. Like, it's Dawn Staley, it's Niall Ivey, period. That's the list right now, I think.
Yeah.
And the coach from GCU, she was pretty good too. She was pretty good. So it's like 1A, 1A, 2A,
yeah,
and then like 1B there. But
Neil's fits are just unbelievable. Yeah. Like she had this like green like snake print silk suit on Sunday, and I was like, what? Like, where is she even? How is she even getting this? This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
This is how women's sports have made it, is when you're getting dressed and fashioned out by the big designers, because I'm assuming that's what's happening.
I hope so. Yeah,
they are looking at the audience that they have, and they are making the most of it. So I can't thank you enough for taking some time. I literally could do this for another 3 hours, but you work mornings, so I don't want to keep you up too late. We haven't even mentioned where people can find you yet, and that is a very bad professionalism on my part. But please tell people where they can listen, either to hate listen or to enjoy listen. Either way.
I can't say we cover a lot of women's sports on the Dan Le Batard Show.
We don't cover a lot of sports a lot of times.
That's also true. So maybe that's a quality.
If you're into comedy, you are going to know so much about comedians.
There's so many comedians that I have only heard of at my job. But yes, we're on wherever you get your podcasts, and then Peacock, I think, Max, a couple other places. But check out the podcast app. YouTube for sure. Yes, definitely YouTube. But yes, please don't make me talk about this anymore, because I'm not a basketball expert. I just pretended like I was one for like 20 minutes. I'm running out of material right now.
Look, you are a professional bullshitter, if that's what it takes, right? Like,
yes,
from one
I
to
agree
the
with
other.
that.
Yeah, but tune in for the F1 minute, because you do knock that out of the park every single time. So again, that. Thank you so much. As I said at the beginning, as a longtime listener of the Dan Le Batard Show, it's the only national podcast I regularly listen to, which is probably terrible for my mental health. But I just appreciate so much just what you bring and the voice that you constantly are trying to give women's sports, and the fact that you keep the you give a little levity to the sausage fest in the shipping container. So I really appreciate what you do and your work, and just awesome for you to come on. And I do think you did a really, really good job of talking about this game. So we'll find out if either of us knew what we were talking about on Saturday. But I think at this point, it was a pretty good show.
Thanks.
A big thanks to Jessica and Mike both for taking the time to hop on Frogs Insider. Lastly, this is a conversation that I've been looking forward to having for a long time. Chauncey Franks has been at TCU doing Fellowship of Christian Athletes work for 15 years, and he's seen it all. He's worked with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of TCU student athletes. He has journeyed alongside them through the highs and lows of their college life, not just on the field, but off of it as well. And he and his team do incredible work journeying with TCU student athletes throughout their college career and beyond. The faith journey that these kids go through, the struggles that they face, the challenges that they face, and you've heard Haley Van Lith talk about some of those struggles and challenges this week leading into the Sweet 16 game. Chauncey and his team do an incredible job of helping student athletes, these young people, navigate these tricky waters of life and of faith and of being a student athlete. And so I'm looking forward to you hearing this conversation. Super thankful for Chauncey jumping on the show. And of course, he gives details to their annual banquet, the Hall of Champions banquet that takes place in late April every year. Details on that banquet are at the end of the conversation with a website that you can visit to go and check out those details. Let's jump into this conversation with Chauncey Franks. Hey, Frog fans, welcome back to another episode of Frogs Insider presented by the Flying T Club. Jamie Plunkett here with a very special guest. You know him from his work with TCU Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He's been at TCU since 2010. Chauncey Franks, he's a leader, he's a life coach, he's a character coach, a mentor, a chaplain, a guest speaker. He does so much for the TCU community working with student athletes, and I'm thrilled to have him on the show today. Chauncey, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here today.
So let's start from the beginning of your journey here. You got to TCU in 2010. You've been at FCA since 2004. Can you just kind of walk me through your calling to ministry and how you ended up at TCU?
Yeah, man, definitely. So, man, I'm a PK kid, a preacher's kid. So, man, my dad was a pastor. Both my grandfathers were pastors. And so, man, anytime the doors of the church were open, I was there. I grew up in a small community outside of Lockhart, Texas. And, man, it was a community that was filled with faith. But just like a lot of us, man, when I left that community and went to college at Midwest State University, man, I enjoyed college life to the fullest. A lot of my identity was in my sports, partying, and everything that comes with that. And, man, did that. And even in the midst of living crazy college life, I always knew that, man, my life wasn't aligned to what the values that my family and those in the community modeled for me. And there'll be times, man, I'll be coming home drunk from a party and just say, God, man, keep me safe. Let me make it home tonight. And, man, I graduated from Midwestern, and, man, I was in graduate school doing a lot of partying. I used to throw promotional parties. I would rent out a club. Man, I would flyers throughout the city. And, man, I would bring people to this party. Man, I threw the best party in Wichita Falls, and I was making all kind of money doing that. And one day, man, God just began to really unravel all the things that I found my identity in, the success that I was having. And, man, God just began to break that up. And, man, I met a young lady, beautiful young lady that invited me to church. And when I got to hanging around that group, man, it was something that I knew I needed and I knew God was calling me to. And so, man, that was in 1998. I gave my life to the Lord in Wichita Falls. After that, I coached college football at Midwest State University. And as I was coaching there, really still felt God was calling me to something deeper. I love the X and O's, but to me, it was the X and O's of the heart. And so I left coaching, moved to Dallas. I was a youth pastor for a while, but I still had a strong longing to be around coaches and athletes. That's been a part of my DNA my whole life. And my pastor at the time there at the church I was youth pastor at, he told me about Fellowship Christian Athletes. I wasn't involved with FCA when I was in college or when I was in high school, and knew very little about FCA. And we went to the FCA office and met a guy named Mike Nowak. Mike Nowak actually played football here at TCU. And as I got a chance to talk to Mike, he was sharing the vision and mission of FCA and how FCA heart desires to reach every athlete and coach for Christ. And as Mike and I was talking, I was thinking, Lord, that's kind of what my heart has been praying for. And so long story short, they brought me back in the following week and they offered me a job. And I started working with local high schools and junior highs in the Dallas area, Rockwall, Garland. Matter of fact, kind of a story here, Josh Hoover, when we kicked off FCA out at his high school, I was a part of that local chapter. And met his father. And so I've been knowing Josh since he was a baby. Literally since he was 1 year old, I knew who this young man was, and has been friends with his dad for 20 years now. And so fast forward, after that first year, I started also helping out doing the FCA at SMU, and a gentleman there, a guy named Jerry Barlow, who was the team chaplain, said, "Hey man, my time has come and gone. I'm going to pass that baton to you." And so met Coach Phil Bennett, started growing the FCA ministry there, and man, God did some incredible work there. And then in 2009, I think Drew Jones came in. That was his second year. And God began to close that door. And I met a guy named Donnie Snyder, who was the FCA director for Fort Worth area. And he was also good friends with Jerry Barlow. He was saying, "Hey, man, I heard about the work that you were doing at SMU. We are dreaming about having a life and character coach position at TCU. Would you be interested in interviewing for it?" I'm like, cool. Knew not a lot about TCU outside of this. That was a point in time TCU program was climbing. Obviously knew who Gary Patterson was, his success and what he was building. And as I started going through the interview process, I was like, man, this would be an incredible place to build the FCA ministry. And job came available, and they offered me the job. And that was in the summer of 2010. And that was my first football season here, was the Rose Bowl year. So I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I think the 5 years I was at SMU, we might have won 13 games. And that first year at TCU, we won 13 games in one season. And so that was my journey to TCU.
Well, first of all, welcome to the better side of the Metroplex, right? I know that everybody makes that joke because as a guy who was born in Dallas and did a little work near SMU for a while, the rivalry is strong on these sides of the Metroplex. But we're thrilled that you've been at TCU for as long as you have, Chauncey. And now, just in the course of your journey at TCU from 2010 to now, that 15-year journey. How has your ministry changed? Are there milestones along the way that you look back on and think, wow, that was a real moment of growth for me, and that was a real moment of growth for my ministry? I'd love to hear a story or two about your journey at TCU.
Yeah, it definitely has. I'm currently in the process of writing a book and basically just telling my story for the last 15 years I've been here at TCU. And so I've been doing a lot of reflecting over the last 15 years. And in a lot of ways, have changed. I would say the first year of the Rose Bowl team, you come into a year where you had a very veteran team, a very veteran leadership quarterback, a team that had guys who were walking faithful with.
Uh-oh. Chauncey, you still there?
All right, there we go. We're back.
All right, no problem.
Okay, you had a very mature team, and I can remember and at that point in time, you had a group of athletes who was leading a campus ministry called Ignite, and Andy Dalton and that group of leaders, and they were having 600 plus students and student athletes come to that. And so I can remember that first year, like, God, man, like, am I even needed here? I mean, you got this, you got this team, and you got this maturity, and after that first year, that maturity and a lot of those guys who had a solid faith left. And what that left was a group of young guys who were really trying to, figure out their identity and who they were outside of football players. And so I would probably say the first year here at TCU was just a year of investigating, but it was the second year, and you would remember this, and I'll talk about this in the book, is, when got a call one morning, and it was the big drug bust and that scenario. And I just feel at that moment, God showed me that, hey, man, you are needed here, and you're going to have the opportunity to have an impact in the hearts and lives of coaching athletes over your time here. And from each year, our ministry, just like if you plant a tree, the roots get deeper. And our impact each year has get a about that. I'm getting all these phone calls coming in.
You're a popular man, Chauncey.
No, I say all that. But over the course of each year, just the relationships with the student athletes and the coaches just began to grow. I mean, watching young men and women where they first get to campus. I can remember Sam Carter, a young man who's a part of the Katrina move from Louisiana to Texas and eventually ended up at TCU, was a quarterback in high school and moved to defensive back at TCU. And the amount of times conversations me and him would have after practice, just talking about, his Coach P getting on his tail. I'm like, bro, he deserved to get on your tail. I mean, Sam Carter, his freshman year as a football player, I mean, he wouldn't hurt a gnat. I mean, he was not the player that he ultimately grew into. And then to the part of where Sam basically becomes an extension of Coach P on the field. I mean, I would probably say one of his most trusted players that he gave the freedom and trusted Sam's leadership, and then to have the opportunity to officiate Sam's wedding and still mentor Sam today. And so there's so many of those kind of stories of the depths of the relationships that have happened over the last, from the day one on campus where you're just you go to practice. The first day I was at TCU was 106 degrees. We had, I think it was 4 or 5 individuals that passed out that day. And it was even a couple of young ladies who were the water girls who passed out. And as I was standing there that day, it was so hot, man, I got a little dizzy. And I was just like, man, how crazy would it be? The chaplain, first day, I pass out. I was like, God, I cannot pass out on this field. That's the last thing that I want to do is my first day here, I pass out. But I survived that practice, survived Coach P, loving having the opportunity to work with that legend, future Hall of Famer coach, an individual that, I'm always going to give Coach P his flowers. I wouldn't be here in the position I am today, and TCU wouldn't be where they are today, man, without his sacrifice, without his commitment, without his love for the game, without everything that he's dedicated, his heart, mind, and soul. And oftentimes when you have a person that is driven, they can be misinterpreted, but the great ones are always they're different because they know, that their insanity is what makes them great. And Coach P and Gary Patterson, he's not only a Hall of Famer coach, but he's also a Hall of Famer person as well too.
So your staff has grown quite a bit at
Yes.
TCU. You've got obviously Coleman Maxwell, who's been with you for quite a while, Carrie Cassie Burnett, Mitchell Traver, and Maya Wilson on your staff now. So as you've started to build out your team over the last several years and deployed them across campus, tell me a little bit about what FCA on campus looks like today.
Yeah, man. When the hard thing when I first got here, the first 4 years was a lot of me running around and really just toiling the ground, investigating each sports, making impacts with each sport. But you can only go so deep when it's just you. And so over the course of the last 15 years, we've grown our staff from one person to 5 individuals that are on campus. And what that does is that allows us to go deeper into each sport environment. And so every sport at TCU environment is almost its own community. Football is its own community. Baseball is its own community. Men's basketball, women's basketball, soccer, equestrian, and so on. All those are their own communities. They have their own schedule. You have, students that kind of have similar personalities, but also similar athletic abilities. And what we are doing is that we are going to each environment and adding value. And that value could be one-on-one mentorship. It can be having Bible studies. It can be pregame chapels. But our most effective ministry strategy is what we call the ministry of presence. That is when we're at practice, we're traveling, we're around the student athletes and coaches. Because what happens is that as you are around and they begin to understand what your role is, that you're not there for the X and O's of the game, but you're there for the X and O's of their life. They see you as a trusted figure, as someone to talk to. Just for example, a young man that I've had a little bit of interaction with, but yesterday went to Chow Hall, man, he's getting some nachos. I'm loading up my nachos, and he says, "Hey, man, Chauncey, hey, bro, can we get together, man? I got some questions about God. Would love to just sit down with you." He says, "Man, I believe." I said, "Hey, bro, like let's do that." I said, "Man, I'm honored that you would even have the courage to just ask me, and man, I'm humbled that you would ask me, and I'm looking forward to being able to do that." And so having multiple staff, it allows us to be spread across the campus. It allows us to not only go wide, but it's allowing us to go deep. So we got Mitchell Traver, who pitched here at TCU, that I served over there at the baseball team up on the Slosh, and Coach Los. Actually, I did the coach's Bible study this week because Mitch and his wife are about to have a baby. But man, I've always dreamed about us having a baseball guy. I'm a football guy. I played football in college. Baseball is a different world. Baseball athletes are a different world. And to have a guy like Mitchell who went to TCU, played baseball at TCU, but also was a part of our FCA ministry as a student, went into the corporate world for 3 years, met his wife through FCA, and now is back on staff. Man, what a better person to serve those coaches and athletes. Coleman Maxwell, he's been with me 10 years. Carrie Casey played tennis at Sam Houston State, and Maya Wilson, her husband's assistant coach on the women's basketball team. She played basketball at Rice University. And so you have individuals that were also college athletes that have a heart for the Lord and who are walking in an environment to build trust, to add value, and to make disciples. And that's what makes our ministry special, is that we are meeting our coaches and athletes right where they're at. We are taking at times the vision a coach may have to help build character and leadership, and also his faith as well too. And we come along and help them bring all of that to life.
So let's dig in a little bit into one of these areas, because yesterday, on Wednesday of this week, we had the opportunity to sit down with Haley Van Lith and Mark Campbell a little bit ahead of their Sweet 16 game against Notre Dame in Birmingham this weekend. And you came up in conversation because of the leadership work that you've been doing with that small group of women's basketball players. And without giving away any state secrets or details of what you guys talked about, I would love to know just what your plan was going into those sessions. I believe there were 12 or 13 of them. And then just what kind of came out of that for the women and for you.
You know, man, is a lot. So let me start here. So I truly believe in God's sovereignty, his plan. I believe that God is always working for the good. And I remember not knowing anything about Coach Campbell, but at his press conferences, hey, I like to, I remember as he was coming, I'm asking people, Brian Esther's, different people, hey, what do you know about these guys from the West Coast? You just think like nobody really didn't know much about him. I didn't know anything about his faith. And so the first thing in his press conference, hey, I like to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I'm like, who is this guy? And over the course of that first year, we were kind of both just kind of filling each other out, just getting a chance to know each other. I know things, he got a million plates going, but the second year really just started this past summer, started getting involved with recruiting, different individuals like Hunter, when they would come, and many of those ladies, when they would come on campus, I would have the opportunity to be a part of that and to share with the ministry and with FCA and how we have individuals that are there to be support for their student athletes, spiritually, mentally, mentorship. And through that process, really began to build a relationship with Mark. We had them at my house for their first outing in July. I have a big basketball court in the backyard. We came over, the whole staff, fed them. They went to the basketball court. Nobody touched the basketball. They played pickleball. They played tennis. They played with my kids, but nobody touched the basketball, which I thought was funny. And that day was able to speak into their hearts, encourage them, talked about you have a blank sheet of paper. This year, you have the opportunity to do something special. And at that moment, we were speaking big vision and just open up their hearts to the possibility. And several days after that, Coach Campbell reached out to me. He was sharing with me the vision he had. They had 11 leadership principles that he wanted to take the 4 starters, the seniors on the team through that leadership principle. So he sent it to me, and it was a sentence for each principle. So I saw that, and I said, you know what, let me build this out a little bit and turn it into a curriculum. And so I'm working on my executive MBA at TCU. And so I put my MBA training into action. And I took those 11 principles that the basketball team came up with and developed curriculum and put this manual together and sent it back to him. So, hey, what do you think about this? He says, man, I love it. And I want you to teach it to them. Like, oh. And so I wasn't looking for that opportunity. I was just trying to help Coach develop out his vision. And over the course, he's like, okay, I said, I'm in, Coach, count me in. And so, man, for that first half, Coach and we would meet with them. I would bring in those principles. And for me, it was an opportunity to meet a very talented group of young ladies and trying to build trust, but also to help coach their hearts their mind, and their perspective. And so that time period, man, I loved it. It was an opportunity for me to come in to teach the principles, but I'm also was shepherding their hearts. I was also reminding them who they are, encouraging them in sports, challenging them. There were times like, hey, man, y'all were afraid to lose last night and y'all played like and y'all lost. There were times in that game that your teammate needed you to rally behind them and y'all didn't do it. And being able to help coach them and challenge them in such a way that I'm not coaching them on the court, but I'm watching every aspect of how they play the game. And I tell them, hey, I'm watching them when they were playing Baylor at Baylor for the Big 12 championship. As I'm watching the game, I'm watching the communication, I'm watching the lessons. And I could see as I'm watching that game, all the principles that we've been talking about, I can see it lived out in that moment. And so that time period, man, was a special period with a special group of young ladies. It was a historic moment. And the crazy thing about it, man, I remember Coach talking about having to play, playing Notre Dame, playing South Carolina, playing NC State. He says, man, either I'm going to look like a lunatic, I'm going to look like a genius. And I remember when they won two of those games, and it felt like they've been there for a long time. That team has never felt like they just arrived, and that was the mindset that we had. And so, hearing the comments from Haley yesterday, man, it personally meant a lot to me because sometimes, if I'm honest, in ministry, you wonder if you're having an impact. You wonder if you're making a difference. You wonder if they're hearing the heart that you are, what you're really trying to convey. And, for me, that group of young ladies, man, I care deeply for them. And in our last leadership session, I talked to them about their life legacy. How do you want to be remembered? Not just on the basketball court, because at that point in time they had just beat Baylor. They had won the I think the first round of the tournament, and so their legacy here at TCU will always be stamped here. But how do you want to be remembered in your life? And we talked about the difference between success and legacy. Success can be measured in what you accomplish, but legacy is ultimately what you pass on to others, and how the influence that you impacted in others goes on from generation to generation. And after that, I was able to just speak a blessing over each one of their lives, to encourage them to see the greatness that I see in each one of them. And one of the things that I told Haley in that moment is that, Haley, man, you have a tremendous platform, and I truly believe that God desires for you to share what he's doing in your life. And so, man, that time period with those young ladies, and thankful for Coach Mark and just him entrusted me to walk with them over the last couple 11 weeks, man, was a amazing opportunity. And to see the season and to watch how everything's unfold, and they're still playing, man, that would be definitely in one of my top 3 moments here in my career at TCU.
Well, I mean, it's first of all, we know the work that you do is always important, no matter what, hands down.
Yeah.
In the era of the transfer portal, when so many new faces are getting on campus every single year in every single sport, and the roster turnover is just getting greater and greater and greater, it feels like one of the things that's most challenging to maintain is culture.
Yeah.
And so it's truly a blessing, I think, for TCU to have you and your staff as some of those kind of pillars who allow the culture to be maintained, even in a new era of college athletics where the people are coming in and out a little bit more chaotically than they used to.
No, I agree with that, man. I truly believe that what you pour into a culture is what you're going to get out of the culture. And when you invest in the individuals that are in the culture, and those individuals are able to feel valued, supported, and find purpose, it's hard to separate them from the culture. I think in the world of athletics, the more that we can have our student athletes and our coaches to have value and support beyond the game, the greater they're going to be invested into that culture. Because, I would give, the 4 seniors, they will forever remember TCU, but they only had a short year. They wasn't, the recruitment was short. The year, this is not the old days where you have someone who redshirt and they may spend 5 years here in Fort Worth. But because when you had a healthy culture that was more than just the game, but a culture that allowed them to grow athletically and then individually, a culture that invested into them as people, into leaders, a culture that helped bring healing to a lot of their hearts, some of the baggage that they brought with them. They will be forever indebted to TCU because TCU invested back into them to help them assimilate into that culture. So, no, I think going forward, the value that we bring, investing in the hearts of our coaches and our athletes, and helping them to have a greater picture and an experience to help them to see that you're more than just your athletic ability and talent, that you have tremendous gifts. And TCU is a great place for you to network, to build relationships, to meet friends, to experience life, and to have people walk alongside you through some of the most challenging things in your life. I truly believe that that's one of the things that can help set TCU apart from other universities.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I know that we're running a little short on time here, but Chauncey, you've got an opportunity to tell this message to a lot more people coming up really soon with your annual banquet. Why don't you go ahead and let everybody know about the dates and times for that, and what all is going to take place at the banquet?
Yeah, our annual banquet, it's our TCU FCA Night of Champion banquet, and it is our annual fundraiser. But more importantly, it is a night that, man, we brag on what God is doing in the hearts and lives of TCU coaches and athletes. And it's a lot of amazing story of young men and women that we cheer on, but hearing the stories of the fuel that is fueling their life, the struggles and the victories. And so it's a beautiful night, not only, I would say, for adults, but I would say encourage individuals when young adults, kids, teenagers come, when they see these college kids and coaches share their faith in their struggles and how faith has helped them to overcome in life. It's a beautiful night. This year we have Mark Campbell, our women's basketball coach, will be one of our key speakers, and Coach Bashard, who is one of the men's basketball coach. Then you have our student panels. You'll hear from student men and young men and female who will share about what God is doing in their life and how they utilize their sport and platform to glorify God. That's going to take place April 24th. Inside the indoor practice facility there on TCU's campus. Doors open at 6 o'clock. Programs start at 6:30. I would say it's one of the greatest things that happens on TCU campus every year. We would love for you to be a part of that. You can find sponsorship information at www.tcufca.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chauncey Franks, leader, life coach, chaplain, all of the above for TCU FCA for the Horned Frogs for the last 15 years. Chauncey, thanks for stopping by.
Man, thanks for having me, bro. What a blessing.
Another big thanks to Chauncey. Super thankful for his time and for his ministry at TCU. He does an incredible amount of good, and he is, kind of a pillar at TCU now. So super thankful to have him on the show. Frog fans, that's going to do it for this really long episode. We will be back later this week to either talk about a Sweet 16 win or an Elite 8 advancement or whatever. We're figuring out the timing because that game happens on Monday night. But Melissa and I will both be in Birmingham. If you're going to be in Birmingham, swing by and say hi. And until then, we'll talk to you next time. Go Frogs.